All right, Vertex tool. So the Vertex tool allows us to manipulate the vertices between in the corners of our brushes. So if you remember, I mentioned a few weeks ago, or well, I guess about a week ago, that a brush is basically just a collection of points where and then we kind of join those points together to create a shape that becomes a solid in the game. So the Vertex Edit tool allows us to grab those points and manipulate them. Now, the thing about this is you can make brushes that can't exist by crossing over a vertex and creating like an inverted surface on a brush, which will crash your map. So I would recommend before you do anything with this lesson is that you save a backup copy of your map. So the way I would do that is I would click File, Save As, and I would just give it a new name, like new or something. So it's my map, but I'm giving it a new name. And so what'll happen is your previous map, the one you were working on up until this moment, is still there. Everything you're doing from this lesson forward is going to be in this new map. So if you accidentally make a mistake and you break something, we can just revert back to the other map. Okay? So again, I would make a backup copy. So follow along. I'm going to just, my machine is lagging like crazy today. I'm going to file, save. So that saves my map in its current state. All right? Then I'm going to click File, Save As, and I'll type in new. Save. Give it a second because my machine's got to catch up. There we go. So now I'm working on same map, new. So my old map, same exact map, I just saved a copy of it. So now I'm working on like a new iteration of it. Okay? And really important because this is one of those things where we can destroy your map when we make this. So we're going to start with a brush. So I'm just going to take my block tool and find an open place in your map, and I just want you to make a block. Okay? And the size of it doesn't really matter. Just kind of a block though. Give it, some height to it because I want a nice big block to play with here. But the dimensions of it don't really matter for this first one that we're doing as a test. All right? So here's my brush, and I just created it like I would create any other brush. I just take my block tool, I draw out a shape, press enter, and there's my block. Okay? Alright, so here's my block that we're going to manipulate. Now we're going to go to the Vertex tool, which is the bottom tool on this list here, the one that shows the little points on the corners. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to have this selected. Okay, so if I don't have it selected, I can just go Vertex Edit, click on the block that I want to manipulate. All right, what you're going to see is suddenly all these dots everywhere. So those are the corners. And then there's also one that's in the center of each edge. All right? We do not typically manipulate the vertex inside the 3D view because we like to keep things lined up and on grid, and it's really hard to do that in a three-dimensional view. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to work in these two-dimensional views here. So I'm going to make a piece for my roof that sits up here. Now you'll notice I've already got the ceiling of my rooms put in because the roof of your house is going to be done in a couple of parts. You're going to have the ceiling, which is, the thing above your head, this, and okay, and then on top of that I'm going to put the actual roof, and that's going to give you the ability to make kind of a nicer, more realistic roof for your house than just dropping like a triangle on the top of it. You're going to have these kind of weird pointy edges and stuff. All right. So we are going to put a roof or a ceiling, I guess, above. So there's my ceiling. Okay. And then on top of the ceiling here, I'm going to put the roof or the angled pieces. So I'm going to take this block, and I'm going to find it in my view here. Here it is. I'm going to grab the little white blocks in the corners. So whichever corner you want to grab, doesn't matter. I'm going to grab the corner and I'm going to move it. Zoom in. I'm going to grab the other corner and I'm going to move it. And then I'll keep zooming in. And I can manipulate this thing to create the shape that I want. Now let's look at it in my 3D view. All right, you can see what I'm making here. Now notice it hasn't actually cut the brush yet. It's still solid. It's kind of got like a little ghosted image of what it's going to look like. It doesn't do the actual cutting until you click off of it. Then it chops it into the pieces. All right. Now, if I wanted to do a perfect triangle, right? I want a nice ridge line right down the top of my roof here, right? So right now it's flat, and I want an actual triangle here, right? So I'm going to take my Vertex tool. I'm going to take these points, the white points, and I'm going to move them into position. And I'm going to put one point right on top of the other point. And when I do that, I'm going to get a pop-up. And it asks if I want to merge them. So what it's going to do is now, instead of being a four-sided block, it's going to turn it into three sides. It's going to take out an extra vertex and it's going to merge them to create a triangle. So instead of a rectangle or a trapezoid or whatever, it's now going to be a triangle. That's what this warning here is telling me, that, hey, do you want to merge these points? And I'm going to say yes. All right? And so now, when I click off of it, back on it, it did the change, and now that's just a single point. See, I move it, and it's now a single point. It's no longer two corners that got, that I moved separately. It's a single point now. All right. Now, when you're working in the two-dimensional views, the way the handles are manipulated, this is a flat two-dimensional view of this thing right here, right? So it's a flat representation, two-dimensional view. When I click on this point right here at the top, can you see how these two turned red? So watch, I'll do it again. Okay, so I'm going to take my Vertex tool, I'm going to select this thing. So see how all the points are white, all right? From my two-dimensional view, when I click on this point, which it's one of these two right here, I'm not sure which one, I'd have to figure it out on my map, but it's one of these top corners, right? But the thing about the two-dimensional view is when I click on it, it'll automatically grab any points underneath it, like if they're stacked up in a two-dimensional view. So that's why when I click this point right here, so see my triangle, right? That's this triangle right here. When I click this point right at the top, it grabs both top points. And now when I manipulate it, I'm manipulating the entire top of my roof here. Okay? And then to set it, remember, you always click off of it and it makes the adjustments. All right, so that's how I'm going to make my roof pieces. So let me make another one, and we're going to look at one more thing. Okay. All right, so here's a block. Get this in the map. Okay. All right, so here's my block. Here's my previous one. So I'm going to go ahead and do some vertex editing on this one too. But I want to line things up a little bit. That'll work. Okay. All right, so now in a lot of houses you have an L-shaped roof. You'll have one kind of wedge that faces, maybe this is the garage, and then you'll have another wedge that goes the opposite direction. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to go ahead and manipulate this one to be like a triangle facing the opposite direction. So I'm going to take my Vertex tool, got this guy right here, grab it, and I'm just doing the same thing, and I'm just bringing my points together to make my triangle. And remember, when I cross the points over, I'm going to get that warning. Do I want to merge? I say yes. Click off of it. It does the cut. So now I've got these two triangles, right? So look, now I've got two triangles. But there's this really awkward gap right here. And if you look at the roof on your house, I can almost assure you that there's no weird gap like this. All right? So we can fix that. So I'm going to use Vertex Edit, okay? And I want these little white corners here. Now, remember I said I generally work in my two-dimensional views, right? This is going to be a case where I'm actually going to use the 3D view to grab the point first. Because what happens when I click on a point in a two-dimensional view? It grabs both, right? So this two-dimensional view, this triangle is this roof right here. So when I click on this peak right here at the top, when I click on that, it's going to grab both of these pieces. Because remember, that's how I said these work. If I click on this, it grabs both of them. Now I want this one, but I don't want this one. So this is a case where I'm going to go into my three-dimensional view. I'm going to select a single point. See how it let me grab just that one right there? Now I can come into my view here and I can move just that one vertex. See the magic I've done there. So I took this wedge that I have, this kind of tent-shaped wedge, I grabbed just this corner and I dragged it over to this piece right here, and then watch what happens. See? Now that looks more like a roof, right? It looks more like what you might see in a house. Because now I've got the two peaks of the roof, or the top ridge lines, they meet up here at the top. Right? Let's do that again. So I'm going to back up. Let me get out of vertex mode. Okay. So I'm going to do that one more time. All right. So I've got my wedge or whatever. I'm going to go to vertex edit mode. And I'm going to select it. Now I only want this corner right here, this top corner. I don't want this back corner here. So that means I can't click right here. If I click in the two-dimensional view, it grabs both. I don't want that. So in my three-dimensional view, I'm going to click on the edge or the vertex that I want, just this one. Now I'm going to go to one of my two-dimensional views. I'm going to grab that red point. See, it's red right there. If I zoom out here, it's right there. You can see it's red. It's red. Okay, so all three of these views, actually all four of the views, I'm looking at this point right here. Now I'm going to grab it. I'm just going to click on it and drag it. And I'm going to move it in line. You can see really good what's happening here. It's creating this new piece as it's dragging that roof piece out. So I'm going to drag this and line it up right there. Right? Now I'm gonna get a little overlap here, it looks like, but I'm okay with that. Remember, I told you that we would get some overlaps when we started bending brushes, and that's exactly what's happening here. Is I'm just kind of manipulating these brushes, and there's going to be instances where you're going to get a little bit of overlap, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Okay, so that should enable you to make any roof piece you want. Now I'll give you guys a tip for making the roof. If you go onto Google Earth and you look at your house from the satellite view, you'll be able to see where all the peaks and valleys are on your roof. It'll make the whole process a lot easier. All right, save often. This is a great way to break your map. The map will get wrecked if you create a brush that inverts on itself. So let me show you what I mean by that. Alright, so here's a brush. Let me shrink it a little bit. Alright, so here's a brush. I go to Vertex Edit Mode, and I grab a corner, and I move it, and I grab another corner. So you cannot create like inverted spaces or negative spaces. So what I mean by that is, see, these all push outwards from, if you made an imaginary point in the center, everything kind of goes outwards. If I drag this piece in and I create this inwards bend, I create a brush that can't work. Okay, so if I needed to create this shape, I would actually end up doing it out of a couple of brushes. I would probably make one triangle shaped like that, and then I would make another one, over here or something like that. So you can't make these, as long as it bulges outward or it's straight, you're good. But if you go in, that's when the brush becomes invalid. All right? So you cannot grab these edges and go in with them, because that'll create an invalid brush. The other thing you can't do is you can't like cross over like this. So see how this point, I cannot cross this point, because see this weird inversion I made here? That will be an invalid brush, and it'll delete itself, and it could crash your whole map. All right? So those are the things you want to avoid. We never want to create like a invert or a depression into the surface, and we never want to cross points. We never want to take a point and cross over another point. All right? We can merge them, that's fine, but we cannot cross them. All right? Okay, so that's your assignment, to make your roof, and this will probably take you a while, so go slow. Send me a progress update, but I don't expect to see the entire roof done, but I just want to see how your progress is going.